Hello and welcome to the first episode of Nihil After Hours, a Fire Emblem podcast, because I realized that there weren't that many Fire Emblem podcasts other than Pair Up, which Mangs does over on his channel. So I wanted just an additional one to give users some variety and let you listen to different things. So my first guest is
TheKillera.
Yeah, who is currently doing a Let's Play with me of Shadow Dragon on the channel. So check that out if you haven't yet. And we're going to go over a couple different Fire Emblem topics, and we might stray from Fire Emblem a little bit here and there, but that's fine. It's my podcast, and I can do what I want.
To be fair, you come to a podcast to hear people talk, not just for them to read some lines.
Yeah, so we're going to start with some very typical Fire Emblem-y questions. What is your favorite Fire Emblem game that you have played?
My favorite Fire Emblem game. I might as well say, since in case anyone hasn't watched the Let's Play, I've played mostly the recent ones. I've played Path of Radiance alongside Nihil, but the ones I've actually played myself are Awakening, Fates, and Echoes. For my favorite game, I would have to say it was Awakening. Mostly because I liked the character cast more, and it felt more like a complete story without having to split off into separate paths.
I gotcha. You also played through Warriors with me, though I don't blame you for that not being your favorite story.
It was fun to play because I do enjoy my Warriors games, but yes, I would not say it was a great story. It was good enough. It worked.
Yeah, it worked. It was serviceable. So who is your favorite character in Fire Emblem, would you say?
I would say my favorite character is Cordelia, a perfectionist Pegasus Knight from Awakening. I do not remember all the characters that I've played, but I do remember her. She sticks out in my mind. I liked how much she was, even though she was a perfectionist, she wasn't that annoying with it, and that came out mostly in her desire to keep working hard and keep practicing to better her skill on the battlefield.
Alright, and I'm reaching way back in my memory, but when you played Awakening, you didn't keep her as a Pegasus Knight, if I remember right.
Interesting memory. I think I might have made her what was it, the Swordmaster?
I think you did.
Yes, I think I liked her because she had really good speed and skill, and I generally preferred Swordmasters to Pegasus Knights because I think I made myself a Swordmaster, and that's why she became a Swordmaster, because I married her.
Alright, all good reasons. Do you have a least favorite character, or anybody that really sticks out to you, and you're just like, wow, I hate that guy?
As you might find, if you ever listen to me more, I'm generally pretty neutral. I don't hate most people, but there are a few people that kind of get under my skin. One person that I remember that I dislike is Arthur, an axe user from Fate's Conquest. Biggest reason I'm not a fan of Arthur is because he's this very arrogant, very hero-like person, and I'm not too fond of people who keep spewing about justice, because I always worry that those people don't understand that they're going to do evil if all they care about is fulfilling their own justice. Also, he's an axe user who has skills that make him less accurate. I like consistency. Removing accuracy is not consistency.
Yeah, a lot of people have already talked about this, so I won't talk about it too long, but yeah, it's really strange that Arthur is in Conquest at all, because it would make a lot more sense, I think, for him to be Hoshiden, because Fates is really black and white. Nor is evil, Hoshido is good, and so he talks all about justice while you're sending him on missions to terrorize villages, attack innocent people, conquer other people's lands. I mean, it's really hard, to justify when you put the Arthur that's in support conversations that goes on and on about justice, and then, the jump in logic is that, okay, so Corrin told Arthur, we're going to Hoshido to take over their lands because ours aren't good enough and take all their resources for ourselves. And this justice guy goes, Yeah, okay. Justice.
That's a fine line with justice, because sometimes you actually can try and make a neutral position, get justice for everyone, but it can be very easily corruptible in what might be Arthur's case, where it's justice as long as it's good for my side and the people I care about.
Yeah. It's interesting to me, too, that you said that you liked that Awakening felt like a full story, and it wasn't cut into pieces as much. I actually am finishing Awakening now, many years after it came out, because I just couldn't... It just didn't hold my attention the first time I played it, and I know a lot of people had that issue. So I'm finally going back and finishing it. But I had totally forgotten that it's segmented a lot into kind of several different stories. Because you've got, it starts with Gangrel and killing the Exalt, etc. And then that's the end of that story, essentially. And then there's a time skip, and you have Walhart the Conqueror 2 years later. So I just thought it was kind of interesting that I really felt like that was multiple stories, and I really like how it did it. It kind of gave a greater sense of scale to the whole adventure, but it's interesting to me that your reasoning on that.
Yeah. To be honest, a good chunk of that might be it's been a long time since I've played Awakening, so I might not remember, because when you said time skip, I didn't actually remember that there was time skip. I know there's time manipulation with the children and whatnot, but I'd actually forgotten about that part. So it might be a case of I remember certain key parts, and in my mind, I connected them over an arc, which actually is more segmented than I can remember, because I've played Fates a lot more recently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like I said, I think it does it very tastefully and very well, but it is just interesting that it is very clearly segmented into several different arcs. More so than I think the other Fire Emblem games are, though you could also divide some of those into different arcs as well. So your favorite game was Awakening. What is your least favorite game you've played?
Ooh, least favorite game. That's going to be a bit of a hard one, because I haven't played nearly as many as you have. Obviously not Awakening, because it's my favorite. I did enjoy Path of Radiance too. Path of Radiance probably close second in favorite. So I would almost have to say it might have been Echoes, honestly.
Really? I'm surprised.
I like
Fates, by the way, for the sake of talking about games, we're going to split Fates into 3.
Yes. So Fates was 3. I never actually played Revelation. I've only played Birthright and Conquest. I liked Birthright a bit more than Conquest, but it's still pretty even. I think one reason I liked Echoes the least, which isn't saying much because I still really enjoyed it, but there were several times where I didn't like sort of older game concepts that appeared. One of which is summoners who summon summoners, and how much in times they would throw, oh, there's only a few people there, but we're going to put someone at the very end of the map that's just constantly sending 3 to 5 guys out a turn just to swarm you. And that felt a bit more of an older mechanic that doesn't look as good nowadays.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Echoes is actually one of my favorite games that I've played, but yeah, there's definitely... the summoners are just a pain. And I remember there were definitely times that, it's like, oh, there's only 3 enemies, that's fine. Kind of strange, and then the entire screen fills up with enemies, and I'm like, oh, they expect me to kill all these. Okay. I can definitely agree that's a dated mechanic. How did you feel about the bow range?
The bow range... can you remind me what the differences were?
Yeah, it's that in all of the other games, essentially, bows have 2 range, and then you might have one bow that gives 1 range and one that gives 3 range. But in Echoes, every single bow user has, up to 5 range or more using skills.
Oh, yes, now I remember. I thought that was a very weird take. It makes a bit more sense to me personally, because the bow can shoot pretty far in real life, so it makes a bit more sense they'd have more range in game. But to have such a range advantage felt weird at times, to be able to shoot that far ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of like using siege weapons.
That's what they kind of felt like, with that much range between you. You could definitely just keep a wall and have several archers behind doing sniping attacks from people almost outside your range.
Okay, so I know this is a question that Mangs asks on Pair Up, and I'm gonna copy that as well. Do you have a Fire Emblem waifu that you really just want to throw out there?
I don't really believe in waifus, because I recognize that it's, never gonna happen, because it's 2D world and whatnot. If I was going to choose one to declare my waifu, it would probably... I said I liked Cordelia earlier, but I don't think I would want her as a waifu, because she's too much a perfectionist, and I'm too lazy, and I bet we'd fight a lot. I've heard a lot of people enjoy people like Tharja, but she's a bit too creepy for my tastes.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was going to choose a waifu, I'd probably get some slack by this, because it's so, common, but I would probably go with... Oh, my brain just said no to the name. That makes me sad. The older sister from Conquest.
Camilla.
Camilla, yes.
Yes.
She definitely seems like someone that it'd be kind of nice, but I worry about her bloodthirst at times. That could be a dangerous component of her.
Yeah, definitely. I also don't really do the whole waifu thing at all, so you're not going to hear much about that on this channel. Sorry about that if that's your thing. But there's lots of content out there for you if that's your thing, let me tell you. Let me see. Another question I have. It's not out yet, and TheKillera is going to be playing through Three Houses with me on this channel, but for that reason, he's also avoided some of the story trailers, so that at least one of us can go in and have very little idea of what's going on. So only seeing the few trailers you have and some of the gameplay you've seen, what is your take on Three Houses so far? Are you excited for it, cautiously optimistic? How do you feel about it?
Okay, to give some more context to the people listening, what I have seen was the initial trailer, as well as the 30-minute gameplay in the E3 conference 2019. I really enjoyed that gameplay as well as the trailer, so I'm actually pretty excited. I've seen some of the elements of you being able to teach someone, and in comparison to other Fire Emblems, I think that's a new and very interesting twist to have all this time before you have your army to actually teach, and as if you are bringing the army up yourself.
Alright, and one last segment, I say one last unless I think of another one. Another segment that I'd like to do on this podcast is a lot of people who play Fire Emblem play other strategy or tactical strategy games at the same time as Fire Emblem, and some people are even more passionate about those. They just cling to Fire Emblem because Fire Emblem has entries coming out more regularly than almost any other tactical strategy game in this day and age. So, is there any other tactical strategy game, tabletop or otherwise, that you play that you really just want to talk about?
Interesting topic. I could definitely see a lot of people play multiple, because if you like Fire Emblem, you probably like several games like that. But to be sort of different, I think I'll talk, especially because you mentioned possible board games.
Yes.
And there's been a board game that I've been recently enjoying on Tabletop Sim called Kingdom Death Monster. It's shortened to KDM if you are looking it up. I really enjoy it because it is, one, a board game, which I'm pretty big on board games, but the main gameplay mechanic is you are a group of survivors, so you have you and 3 other friends joined together. You wake up in this bizarre, barren world that's very confusing. The universe reminds me a bit of darker worlds like Berserk or Claymore manga, if you've ever heard of those. But the actual gameplay is, you are small humans, you've barely woken up, you don't even know how to talk at first, and you have to defend yourself against massive monsters like lions and weird eldritch abominations that make you go insane, while trying to defend yourself with some sticks and maybe some leather armor you put together.
I would say, as an outsider who has not played it, looking at the gameplay, it is grid-based, like Fire Emblem, but like he said, you're fighting giant monsters. So to me, it's kind of a, you know how Three Houses now, we've seen that larger creatures take up multiple spaces. It's kind of like that crossed with Monster Hunter. You've got a giant monster that your party has to kill, and it's all tactical and grid-based.
And that's also a good reference for Monster Hunter, because once you defeat the monster, you actually take some time and carve off pieces from the monster to make better weapons and better armor in the future, so you can hopefully have a bit better chance against stronger monsters that want to rip you apart.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. One of the other really cool things he's told me about this, though, is the miniatures, if you want to buy into that. So why don't you tell us about the miniatures a little bit?
There are several miniatures. Even just in the base game, you have armor sets, because in game you make armor sets from different monsters, and they each have a different look, because they're made from different beasts. What's interesting in the game is they provide you little miniatures that you have to build yourself, but they give you the parts for all the different armors. So you can make your own personal character wearing whatever type of armor combination you want, give them what weapon you would want to make your character that you've made over several hours of gameplay into an actual little model that you can use to display yourself. So it allows lots of customization there. On top of that, outside of the base game, are lots of things called like white boxes or pinups, which give you a very detailed and usually rather sexualized version of a character wearing an armor set or designed in a specific way. So if you really like the look of some type of armor, you can usually spend a bit, get a very interesting looking one for both male and female, by the way. So you can have eye candy for both people, or everyone who wants to enjoy eye candy, and have that be your little character instead.
So I could be a guy that's super ripped in a Speedo with a massive sword, and the model would actually represent that.
Yes. If you don't even want to wear the Speedo, there are models where you can just have your whole thing flowing freely while you do your murder, if that is what you want.
I think that's all that we need to market this game. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I think it was interesting being able to talk to you and get this podcast thing started. Thank you for having me as your first guest.
Yeah, thanks for coming. And for all of you who want to hear more from TheKillera, we're going to be continuing playing Shadow Dragon and eventually Three Houses, so definitely go check those out. And if you have any other guests you want me to bring on, just let me know in the comments. It can be pretty much any YouTuber. It doesn't have to be somebody that specifically does Fire Emblem, but preferably if they've played at least a Fire Emblem game, as that is the theme of this. Unless you just really want somebody on here for whatever reason. And I don't care how many subs they have or anything like that. So just let me know and we'll see if we can get them on. That's it for this episode. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Have a good night.
There you go, you're high again, here we are, we're both content to stone to thinking in a blink, it's time for you to clock in. There you go, you hypocrite, and although you're so sick of it, you always knew you weren't at it, so you never tried to quit now. Ooh.